News reports revealed this victim had just left her bank minutes before this violent confrontation. These two bad guys are using a pincer kind of movement from behind to spring their attack, with the diversion if she was actually paying attention to her rear view mirrors. Hey guys, retired Lieutenant Todd Heaton here with Humilitas First. Houston Police YouTube robbery channel really does provide a lot of teachable moments relating to violent crimes. The location of the robbery in a jugging, it might not be the highest crime area because part of a jugging consists of bad guys staging on a bank and then following their targeted victim to whatever secondary location the victim decides to park at right after visiting the bank. If you live in an area that is seeing a lot of jugging type robberies, then you need to do the thinking as it relates to avoiding finding yourself in these circumstances in the first place. This criminal crew of robbers, they see that she's backing into a parking space, so they suddenly, awkwardly stop at the beginning of this parking lane. Normally, we wouldn't think much of this, as occasionally drivers do odd things like that in parking lots. This circumstance is not normal, because just minutes ago she visited her bank, and even later reports that she thought she may have been followed from the bank. Well, now this odd little maneuver suddenly means so much more. I'm going to keep saying it because it's important. It is through doing the work. In this case, it's the commission of crimes that bad guys or good guys figure out how to do things better. There's other avenues like, going to jail. Jail can serve as a kind of university in violence. Being raised in an environment where there's no shortage of criminals that you can learn from, that's another way. As it pertains to bad guys understanding the fundamentals of violence, well, it's like they've been to university and graduated summa cum laude. Most middle class people and up, well, they haven't even been to preschool. Let's talk about some of the underlying fundamental principles that work. They're going to work for both the bad guys and good guys. What works, works. So what are some of these? Well, one tactic has to do with gaining an advantage in positioning. Humilitas First teaches tactical staging as a fundamental principle. These young men already understand it. So they stage their attack by backing up so that when they get out of their car, she has no chance of seeing this. Why? Well, her view is completely obstructed. She has very short sight lines, particularly off of her left flank, where the primary attack is going to come from. Humilitas First teaches another underlying fundamental principle called throttle control. One aspect of that has to do with timing, when to hold, when to tactically withdraw to a smarter defensive position, and when to advance, largely meaning when to seize the initiative and strike first, defending yourself. These guys have the timing down cold. We'll call this guy number one. He's leading. He's using concealment to his advantage. Number two, he's about to step out into the view of her passenger side mirror. If she were a switched on kind of gal, well, number two here, he can serve as a kind of distraction or a diversion of her attention and focus. That gives number one opportunity to make his final approach. I want you to note bad guy number two's shoulders, hips, and feet are aligned as if he's moving off at this angle, right up until he sees his cohort in crime opening the driver's side door. Then we see a notable shift in the shoulders, hips, and feet, turning and bringing him in closer towards his presumed bad guy backup job. Of course, the victim is not going to see any of that because all of her focus and attention is now devoted to the number one robber who is forcibly taking her property. Bad guy number two discerns that bad guy number one has this under control, so he starts heading back towards the car. Perhaps that was a little hasty. Eventually, number one gets what he wanted, and it's time to get out of Dodge City. There is a hard, cold kind of math that anyone facing this kind of crime has to do. Subject factors and weapon factors. We'll start with weapons. Purportedly, bad guy number one was using a taser, and we don't know what number two might have had, but for most of this violent confrontation, he kept his right hand buried in his hoodie pocket. There is zero mention of this woman having a concealed firearm, so I'm going to assume that she did not. As far as subject factors go, she is small in stature, and she's facing two young men, both bigger, faster, and stronger. If your emotions drive you to begin to chase after them, you might want to do this simple cold math right quick. What are you going to do if you catch them? Okay, let's go back and I'll show you another winning principle that bad guys understand as it relates to winning a fight in the now. Sure, they often get caught later, but that doesn't help anybody in the present moment. Humilitas First also teaches this principle: surprise, speed, and violence of action. Surprise is achieved by number one remaining concealed until he's ready to pick up his speed as he rounds this last 90-degree blind corner. Just about 2 seconds and the violence of action has begun. I know. Violence is not a mathematical problem. Check. Yet, 90-degree blind corners, they can be a real bear. I'll offer the following as a couple of possible solutions. Join a bank outside that big city where juggings are a problem. Yeah, it's more time and money for gasoline, but with just a wee bit of discipline and some organized planning, you can reduce your need for frequent trips to the bank. Most human beings, bad guys being no exception, are lazy. So typically, they're just going to target the bank within the municipal limits, that big city that's probably really close to where they live. Say you don't like that solution and you're like, nope, not going to happen. Learn some counter surveillance techniques to be able to identify whether you have a tail, whether you have a problem. For example, if I have to live, work, and bank in a high crime area, I'm going to operate off that old pithy saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. As you'll see, all it costs me is just a little bit of my time. Bad guys are really good at using surprise, speed, and violence of action to dominate you and yours. They like ambiguity. At its root, we can remove ambiguity by doing some odd things. The first parking lot that I visit after going to the bank, it's going to serve to let me know if I have a problem. As I pull onto the parking lot, I'm going to slow down to give my pursuers a chance to catch up. I might even pause a couple of awkward pauses as if I'm confused. What am I watching for? Well, I'm watching for the next, third, and perhaps fourth car that's going to follow me into that same entrance. Red Toyota, blue Dodge, and a white Mercedes. Guess what? I'm no longer confused. So I'm going to roll on towards that exit on the other side of this parking lot. Why? Simple. I'm leaving. If any of those cars that I just identified follow me right back off this lot, then guess what? I've got a problem. Let's say that even that is just way too much work for you. Maybe you don't have the time. Then I'm going to offer one more possible solution. You have to learn to be far more efficient as it pertains to these kinds of transitions. Parking, getting out of the car and getting moving towards your destination into that building. How many seconds does she set in her car? How long does she give the bad guys to use this kind of a pincer movement to employ surprise, speed, and violence of action and take her belongings? It's hard to tell from this single perspective, but it appears to be about 20 seconds. So if the moment her vehicle stops, she gets out and begins moving, well, it's still, in my opinion, the least best option. And I would really want to be concealed carry just in case my efficiency falls short. In other words, it falls short because these two unjust criminal aggressors start running towards me so that they can pull off the robbery before I make it to the building. I do not like the idea of a physical race as any kind of real good option here. But I do believe that becoming more efficient at transitions, that is going to help in a number of circumstances where, to their surprise, speed, and avoidance, you are no longer where they expect you to be. Sometimes that is a solution.